Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a forever thespian, Jacky Rom, an author, presenter, acting coach, and podcaster, is here to talk not only about books and her show, but also her crush on the theater. Jacky, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
I'm really excited. This year we've had crushes on the idea of nostalgia and like genres of television, so I'm excited you're here to talk about the theater. But before we get started, can you tell us where we can find you online?
Very easy. My website is jackyrom.com. It's simple.
You made it very easy to find you.
Yeah, let me just spell it. It's JACKYROM. So Google me or pop in the jackyrom.com.
Okay. So like I said, this crush it's sort of new for us. Usually we're crushing on a celebrity or someone from like elementary school, but this is a crush on the theater. And this crush began when you're about 5 years old. Had you known anything about the theater or acting before that point?
No, I need to tell you a story because it's the most fascinating story. This being talked about being 5 years old. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a London theatre to see a show, and it really didn't matter what the show was, but at halftime I needed to use the bathroom. When I came back, the lights were out and the show had started. So I sat down, I was in the circle, and I sat down at the front of the circle and to wait so that I could go up to my seat. And as I sat down, I had the weirdest feeling, but something was wrong. Don't ask me why I did this. I bent down and I looked under the kind of the gold railing, and I thought, that's right. Now, none of this made sense at this time. So the next day, I told my mum exactly what happened. She calls me Jacqueline. She goes, Jacqueline, the reason is at 5 years old, you saw your first show in that theatre, and I saw Fiddler on the Roof, the original with Topo, and my grandparents took me to see it, and I sat front row in the circle.
Oh, so you sat in like kind of the same seat as the first time?
And it brought back a memory of the first time I went to the theatre. And it was my mum that said, from that moment at 5 years old, and I stood all the way through the show and watched it standing up, she said, your love for the theatre started then.
And you said you went with your grandparents. I'm going to take it wasn't your idea to go see Fiddler on the Roof. It was probably the adults in your life.
I can't, to be really honest, I can't remember that far back.
Do you remember what about that performance made it like stick out to you and like made you fall in love? Because you said it for a 5-year-old to sit through even a movie is hard. So to sit through a whole production, even harder.
I honestly can't remember, but I do remember my mum took me to the cinema and the theatre from very young, and by the time I was 10 years old I wanted to be a director and producer. And for a 10-year-old, I mean, I'm 63 now, so for 50 years ago, for a young girl at 10 years old to want to be a director, I think is, quite unique. And I was determined I was going to be a director. And at 15, I went to see a careers advisor at school. And when I told her I'm going to be a director, she threw me out. Oh, and said, don't be ridiculous. And so I wrote my first musical play when I was 17, and I produced it and directed it at age 18.
Oh, so did you ever want to act, or were you always someone who just wanted to create the show?
I started taking acting classes at 10 years old, and but I don't remember I don't remember ever wanting to be on the stage. I always wanted to kind of boss everyone else around. That's what you did as a child, you know? And then so I kind of only understood probably 13, 14 years old that what I wanted to do. And then at 17, I thought, I'm just going to write my own. I'm not going to wait. And I wrote and directed at 17 my first play.
And what was it like at age 18? That is very young to write anything that is going to be produced. What was it like kind of putting that together at that time back then?
I would always put my hand up. I still do. You know, I was in a youth centre. We have youth clubs. I don't know if that's something you do or did in America, but we had these youth clubs, and it was fundraising. And I would just put my hand up and say, I've got an idea, I'll write a show. And I don't think about things. I just do it. And I remember doing that. And the very first show I put on, I took a bunch of songs that were either classic or pop, and then I wrote a story around it. And then at 18, I wrote the full-scale musical.
What artists were you kind of inspired by for that?
It's the American divas. So it's always been Liza, Barbara, Bet. It's always been the strong women, always. And even now, I mean, you know, we're 50 years on, and I write crime stories, and still my lead are strong leading ladies to this day, and quite often they've got very flamboyant friends. I love a drag queen. I love their confidence. So I have quite a few drag queens in my books, and it's funny. The first musical I wrote was about a young family with children that wanted to have somebody come and live with them to help them with their child. What we call them an au pair. When the au pair turned up, it was a man. And don't forget, we're talking about 50 years ago, so this was really unusual. And the man was very camp and flamboyant. And of course, everybody was shocked that there was a man living there. Yeah, so that was and it was called Another Mouth to Feed. No idea where the script is now.
Oh, it sounds like you did it before Mrs. Doubtfire.
I know. You're absolutely right. I remember I used to write comedy scenes, and I remember writing a 20-minute comedy scene where there was a group of all these different people on the beach, and suddenly the policeman came. They had to stay there. They couldn't move because a lion had escaped from the local zoo. And I was about 15 when I wrote that.
Wow, you've been writing a long time, and you've done so much since you wrote that. Started writing at 17 and putting on this musical play. What do you think that your 18-year-old self would think of how you turned out in theater and all you've done? Would she be proud?
Oh yeah, she'd be proud, but I think she'd probably slap me on the wrist and say, you could have done this a lot sooner.
Our younger selves are judgmental. They're like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?
Yeah, because I knew what I wanted to do so young. And I mean, I produced 5 years ago a documentary which we've got on Amazon Prime, and that really was my first TV production as a producer. It's taken me, I'm 60 years old. I'm in the pre-production now for a television series which I'm presenting. And I'm absolutely amazed that television channels want a 60-year-old to present. But times have changed.
Well, that's good. That's good that we're changing in that way, because it shouldn't just be the same type of people on TV all the time. It gets boring.
Absolutely.
And as for theater as a whole, you said you fell in love with it back in 1963. Here we are in 2023. What sort of evolutions have you seen in theater that made your love continue 6 decades later? Like, what sort of growth have you seen in theater that makes you be, like, proud?
I think the love of telling a story, and I think inclusion. I love inclusion. I mean, I love seeing some of the shows. Like, have you seen Kinky Boots?
Oh no, but one of my favorite like singers, he did it, so I'm aware of what it is, but I didn't get to see him in it, unfortunately.
And it's funny because it's a true story, Kinky Boots. For anybody that doesn't know, it's a shoe company that was going out of business, and so somebody said to them, "Why don't you make kinky boots for drag queens?" And that's how they saved their business. And so it's a musical. And we've got another one all about Jamie. So I love the uplifting. I think theatre should be uplifting. I think you should go in and come out with a smile, or want to get up and join in. You know, the theatre is to lose yourself in a story, to have 2.5 hours of pure joy. Whether it doesn't matter really if it's a thriller or a musical, but just to be enthralled and taken to a different world.
I like that. I like that you think it should just always be joyous. That is good. That's a good thing. And I assume that's always joyous for you. But is there something that used to happen in the theater world back in the day that doesn't anymore that you kind of miss?
I miss. I don't think so. You know, I think you just always have to look forward. So I kind of don't look back. I think everything now is bigger, better, automated, spectacular, and you just got to keep up with the times. You know, when I was told that I couldn't be a director, I then had very quickly, it even amazes me that I thought of this, I decided I was going to become a makeup artist. That would get me on a film set, and somehow from there I was going to become a director. But I wanted to do prosthetics in makeup, and now, you know, what they do with CGI is just phenomenal. I mean, I was watching The Little Mermaid, the live action Little Mermaid. It's fabulous. So no, every day is a new day in the art form of TV, film and theatre, and I love it.
Yeah, the Little Mermaid graphics look amazing. I'm really stunned because the graphics in Aquaman, I wasn't feeling the underwater, but so I was worried because Little Mermaid is my favorite Disney movie, but I'm happy with it.
Yeah, she's exquisite. She is beautiful. Just so beautiful.
And her voice, I'm glad they casted a singer.
Yeah. And I love Melissa McCarthy as well. And I think she's going to be a brilliant Ursula.
Yes, I've heard good things. I'm excited. So I'm not someone who grew up going to the theater. I was from a very small town. We just didn't have that. I did it in high school, but I was more the tech crew. And then I saw the Book of Mormon because I'm a big South Park fan. So I had to go see what Matt and Trey did. So what sort of play would you recommend to people like me to get them to turn around and maybe go out to the theater more?
I started personally with Shakespeare, and we used to, every year we would go, we had a local park, and we would take our like beach chairs and our blanket, and we would go and watch Shakespeare in the park. And Shakespeare's like driving. You start at the beginning and there's a lot of things to do and you can't quite work it all out, and then one day it clicks and you just sit back and enjoy it. So I think everybody should go and watch Shakespeare. Everybody should go and watch local groups and musicals. Start with the musicals. Start with something that just makes you feel happy. Go to the local group that's doing Oliver or Les Mis, or, you know, just support the local groups, I think.
I'll have to search it out. I think we actually have one not too far away, maybe like 30 minutes, and it is down the street from my favorite restaurant in this area, so
perfect.
A plus.
Yeah.
So you did theater. You also mentioned the documentary on Amazon and working in TV and movies. you've done that for 40 years now, and that I feel like that's a whole different world than theater. So other than like the live aspect, what do you think separates an actor that can perform in theater and on the stage versus actors who only do film and television?
It's really simple. An actor that works on the stage will have worked originally on the stage and then they move to film. It's very difficult for a film actor, purely film, to go and work on the stage because it's a completely different genre. So anybody that's a trained actor on the stage will move to film, but a film actor won't move to the stage.
Like they'll have to work a lot harder to learn this new technique.
It's completely new. Yeah, you have to remember that, especially today where they film in HD, you're playing very naturally to a camera that can be up to between 6 inches and 2 foot away. But when you're on stage, your nearest person is 6 foot and the furthest person is, can be up to 100 foot. So you play it completely different. You also play it up, so your head is up and your vocals are working so that the person right in the back can hear you, and that's very different from talking into a boom, what they call a boom, which is taking your voice from above your head. Completely different technique.
So before we move on, I'd like to do a quick speed round about all things theater. So we'll start with your favorite theater to see your favorite theater to see a play in.
The Savoy Theatre in London.
Why is that? What's so special about the Savoy?
That's the one. That's the one that when I was 5 years old, the first time I went to the theatre.
Well, how old is the theater? Because I know theaters buildings date back, and you're over in the UK, so you guys got some of the oldest buildings. You guys got like cool ones.
I would have to look that up for you, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's over 100 years old.
I bet the architecture is amazing.
Absolutely.
And what do you think is the best play to see when you go on a date?
Now that depends if it's a first date.
Say it's a first date.
Gosh, I wouldn't go on a first date to the theatre because you can't talk to each other. So
settle the nerves.
Mind you, I went on a first date not long ago to a drag show. It was brilliant, and we both loved it. So yeah, maybe something that's cabaret style.
So what is a play that always makes you cry?
Oh, that's easy. Les Miserables. Because I've had lots of my students play in the play, and of course they play Gavroche, and he gets shot and killed. So my little student, who's like 8-9 years old, dies every night. So every night he dies, I cry.
God, 8-year-olds doing Les Mis?
Oh yeah, my name is Gavroche. Yeah, one of the little kids. I've got a little boy at the moment in London on tour with King and I. I've got 3 in London in shows at the moment of my students.
Very nice. King and I. I remember we did have to. We watched the movie in 8th grade. We watched a lot of movies in American schools instead of reading. So gives you a clue to our education system.
Yeah.
So, what is the last great performance you saw at the theater?
I actually saw Young Frankenstein was the last show, and it was so good, so much fun. That was probably the last show, and I always think the last show is always the most memorable till your next one. So I'll go with Young Frankenstein. So
we usually end the crush portion where I ask you, what do you think your life would be like with your crush? But theater has been a part of your life for so long. What do you think your life would be like if you never went and saw that play when you were 5 and you never discovered the theater?
Sad. I think I wouldn't be writing today. I really don't think, because it's the theatre that's always inspired me to write. So I'm sitting in the Caribbean. This is where I live half the year, where I write my books. So I don't think I'd be sitting here. I don't think I'd be writing. I don't think I'd be doing podcasts, radio, TV and everything else. So I'm just kind of thankful that I do.
Mm-hmm. You always wonder, like, if they didn't have tickets that night, what path would you be on, but I'm glad that you did find the path very early and you knew about by 10 what you wanted to do in life. That's really good, and you stuck with it. Not a lot of people do. I mean, I'm not the president of the country. That's what I wanted to do at 10.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, no, I know it's unusual. And I say to people now when they say, teenagers, they don't know what they want to do. And I said, it's okay. You don't have to know. Just watch and learn and live. You don't need to know.
And you don't need to stick with something. You can always change your mind. Life's too short, unless you love it. Then stick with it.
Absolutely.
Now it's time to talk more about what you have going on. So we're going to start with the podcast. It's called The Life of a Crime Novelist. You started that some years ago and have since interviewed everyone from fellow authors to magicians, which is interesting. What motivated you to start that show?
I think everything is motivated by book sales, really. I always say about writing a book, writing it's easy, selling it is hard. So just getting out there and telling people about the books. I'm writing book 17 at the moment, so there's a few out there. And it's just my way of letting the world know what I do.
And are you gearing up for a new season of The Life of a Crime Novelist at the moment?
What I do is watch out for interesting stories and interesting people. I was actually having my nails done last week, and the lady next to me, I don't know what made me start chatting to her, but she was funny. She was in her 80s. And then I started chatting to her and found out that she was born in Luxembourg, escaped at the age of 5 during the war to France, and then eventually to Spain. She didn't go to school for the first 10 years of her life, and then eventually escaped to America. And her story was incredible. And I want to interview people like that are incredible and need their stories told. So it's whoever I find on the way, really.
And you just picking them up, getting your nails done, grocery shopping.
I know. You never know who you meet.
I always say everyone's life story is a book. It's just like, are we going to read it? Do we have time to read them all?
And everybody has a story to tell.
Yeah, and I like that everybody's story is like a different genre too.
Exactly.
So you said you're writing book 17 now, and that means you have 16 already, and you cover a lot of bases. You mentioned you write kids books, you write books for actors, you write the true crime. What kind of what genre did you start in when you started writing books?
I'm actually just adopted a cat, and she's joining in at the moment. So I started because I work with children. I decided the easiest thing for me to do is to write for young people, and I love the age 8 to 12-year-olds. I love teaching them, so I decided to go for that age group. And then when I decided my main character, she was going to be a young detective. So it's still keeping the detective, and she's an actor. So it's really important that you write about what you know. And I've spent 30 years on a film set. So, I've seen all these amazing actors, worked with fantastic actors and people. So all of this past experiences end up in the book.
You mentioned the true crime. Do you find yourself listening to all the plethora of true crime podcasts out there for inspiration?
No, I can't, because it's too much. And so if I'm writing a book, I take about 6 months to do my research, and I sit with people. So I'll sit with police, forensic, criminologists. So I sit and just talk to people. But yeah, that's how I do it. So if I'm listening to something, I do like a bit of politics. I love anything to do with Vegas. I found out on YouTube you can watch people live playing slot machines. So fun. So that's my new passion. And it stops me thinking about my next crime. Not my next crime, but my next crime.
Don't admit that. Don't admit you have a crime going on.
That's funny. No, my next subject matter. Yeah.
Wow, YouTube really has everything.
It really does. So funny.
You mentioned you're working on book 17. Is it true crime? Are we going to the detective kid book again?
No, it's book 3 in the Sandra Bernstein Chronicles. The first book was set on the island where I live in St. Martin. Book 2 in Vegas, and that's what I've got a documentary on Amazon Prime that goes with it. I went to Vegas first to research before I wrote the book, and then this one is based in England. So at the moment I'm working on where I'm going next. So I am working on we're working on a new TV series where I go around the world visiting people and places that could end up in a book. So interesting places and people. So I'm going to some amazing places. I'm going to Cambodia, I'm going to Egypt, Mexico. So I'm going to fantastic places, and then I will decide where the next book is based.
Where have you been that you found the most inspiring to write?
Egypt.
Oh, wow, really?
I love Egypt. There is a sense, the history. Obviously, you can't really understand the concept that most of the things you see are over 2,000 years old. Between 2,000 and 4,000 years old, the temples and the pyramids and the history. And I find there's something magical about the history in Egypt. I don't know why, I've just got an affinity with this history. Maybe I was an archaeologist or something in a past life.
And maybe you were an archaeologist. I've never been anywhere that historical. Maybe like I've been to like the California missions, but it's not that as exciting as I would probably be really excited to see the freaking pyramids. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and then I went to the Wall of China just before COVID. I worked out in China for a few times. This is working, creative writing with children. And so I went to the Great Wall of China. And of course, that's thousands of years old as well. And it's so high and long. And how did they build it? You have to go up in a cable car to get to it. How did they build a wall up there? You know, so I love science fiction. In fact, if you gave me Star Trek, I would sit here and watch Star Trek all night. It's funny.
You've never written in the sci-fi genre, have you, though?
No, it is something that's on my mind to do.
That seems the most free, because sci-fi can be as wild as can be, you know?
Especially today, you know, with the CGI and everything else that's going on. So yeah, maybe one day.
Well, you can do it. I feel like you could do it. You could do
it.
So you've written all these books, and you've written books that help actors, which makes sense because, like you said, you work with kids and you're an acting coach as well. When did you realize you wanted to coach? How did you get into that part of it?
I started at 17 teaching adults. It was bizarre. I don't know how I got away with it. I started doing the acting lessons at 10. And then when I started working as a youth leader in the youth clubs at 17, I started teaching 18-year-olds and older, and then producing the plays. And I'm very good at, I don't know. I don't know how I get away with it. I got away with it. I did. And I just think I'm very much I can do it. There's nothing I can do. So that's probably how I got away with it.
Where did that innate confidence come from? Have you always been like that?
Yeah, I do think it comes from like at 15 being told you can't, and I would go, yeah, all right, I'll show you. So I think there's somebody, don't say to me you can't, because that's like a, you know, red rag to a bull.
So you've been proving that career advice are wrong all these years.
Yeah. All these years, I'm still talking about it 50 years on.
I mean, those little things stick with us. I don't think educators, teachers, people that work at school know how influential they are to what we're going to do. I mean, my PE teacher was so scary now. And every time I actually finish running a mile, I think of her and I'm like, yeah, in your face. In your face.
Yes, it's exactly the same. Don't tell me I can't be a director. How dare you?
And when you were teaching at 17, was it hard to get the respect of those that were older than you in the class?
No, I take control. It's so funny. I don't know how I did it, but because teaching drama is fun, and I just took what I was taught and switched it. Of course, we had no internet then, so it's not as if I could Google class plans or anything. And I don't know how I did it. And I wrote everything down. I've always written my class plans down. So I did like 30 years of class plans. It was all in Dropbox. And then one day I thought, hold on, I've got books full of stuff, because I've written plans every time I've done a class. I've written a plan of action. So I put these plans together and wrote a couple of books out of what I already had in Dropbox.
Oh, well, there you go. There is nothing you can't do, Jacky.
Yeah.
Done it all. You've done it all. And so can you remind people where they can find you and all these amazing things you've done online?
Yeah, go to jackyrom.com or Google me. Just Google Jacky Rom, JACKYROM, and it'll all come up. You can see the podcast, YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram. It doesn't stop, does it?
JackyRom.com. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, how lucky did you get with this last name?
Exactly. And don't forget to go and watch Method of Murder on Amazon Prime.
Well, Jacky, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your crush on the theater and so much more. And everyone, you can find all of Jacky's information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.